All right, we're going to be focusing on something called molecular shapes. We're basically going to be looking at how the atoms are arranged around the central atom and how that affects its shape and structure. So this is all based on something called the VSEPR theory, the valence shell electron pair repulsion. In simplest terms, this is just that electrons want to be as far apart as possible from each other. So we want to also create the largest angles between atoms. So those electrons, again, can be as far away from each other as possible. In Regents chemistry, to determine the shape, I simply want you guys to count the total number of atoms. You're going to need to draw the Lewis dot structure so you can recognize any unshared pairs of electrons if needed. And then I'm just going to expect you to be able to refer to your notes or this chart that you're going to have in them. All right, 1 and 2 atoms is pretty simple. One atom is just simply that it's a sphere, and I think that's pretty self-explanatory. You have a single atom. For 2 atoms, they're both going to be referred to as linear. Now, I'm having you write these as 2 separate spots because I want you to label an extra spot on them. If we look at symmetry, and this is going to be really important when we talk tomorrow about polarity of a molecule. If we have 2 of the same atoms, we're going to have multiple lines of symmetry. So you can label this one up here as being symmetric. However, if you have different atoms, we only have 1 line of symmetry, so we can label that as being asymmetrical. So go ahead and make that extra note onto your chart so that way you have it for tomorrow as well. Now, 3 atoms, we have to look at those unshared pairs on the central atom. Now, if there aren't any unshared pairs, meaning most likely that you have something like CO2 where it has double bonds here, it's going to be considered linear, so it's going to be a whole 180 degrees across. However, if you do have unshared pairs of the central atom, those are going to be repelling these atoms down below, which is why it creates a bent structure. So a great example of this would be H2O. And again, if we go ahead and look at lines of symmetry, the linear shape has a very symmetrical shape. Okay, we can draw multiple lines of symmetry, so this would be symmetric at the top. However, the bent one only has 1 line of symmetry, meaning that we consider it being asymmetrical if we can only draw 0 or no lines through it. So this bottom one would be asymmetrical, so make sure you make a note of that in your notes, because again, this is going to be helpful for tomorrow. All right, moving on to 4 atoms. Again, we're looking at unshared pairs. That's why you need to be able to draw the Lewis dot structures. If there's no unshared pairs in the central atom, you have something called trigonoplanar. It's a very kind of flat molecule. We'll be able to see that in class tomorrow in a more 3-dimensional way. And if we look at the unshared pairs in the central atom of this, where we do have them on A, meaning that they're going to be repelling the atoms down, creating a trigonal pyramidal structure. If we look at symmetry, the top one is very symmetrical. We have multiple lines of symmetry. However, the bottom one only has 1 line of symmetry, so we're going to consider the top being symmetric and trigonal pyramidal as being asymmetrical. So again, make sure you make a note of that in your notes. And then for Regents, you guys just need to know up to 5 atoms. And here we're looking at basically, do the atoms on the outside match each other or not? They're both going to be referred to as being tetrahedral. The difference is going to affect the symmetry, which is going to be very important in our concept tomorrow. So at the top one, we have multiple lines of symmetry. Okay. However, on the bottom, we only have 1 line of symmetry. So our top tetrahedral structure, where they're all the same, is very symmetric. Our bottom one is going to be asymmetrical because of the limited number of only having 1 line of symmetry. All right, one thing I did want you to just be aware of is you guys in Regents don't need to know bond angles, but I think it's important to have an idea of what this is. Basically, using this different structure, this is an example of H2O, these black empty orbitals actually holding 2 electrons, just not atoms. So those are what causes this 104-degree angle between in this case, 2 hydrogen atoms, try and keep them as far away from each other, but also as far away as possible from these outer electrons. NH3 being pyramidal, this creates a 107-degree angle between, in this case, the hydrogens. This is just those unshared pairs of electrons that are basically repelling and pushing those atoms down. And then finally, CH4, this is an example of tetrahedral kind of 3D structure. This has a special 109.5-degree angle between those 2 hydrogens. And again, they're arranged like this because it creates the farthest distance between the atoms in this molecule. All right, that's all you need to know. This is going to definitely apply to what we're doing tomorrow in Concept F. So make sure you made those additional notes about symmetry in your chart. If not, go back and make sure you record them in. You can go ahead and write your summary or go ahead and complete the Edmodo quiz.